Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you to One Nucleus for the invitation to speak, and thank you again to the sponsors for supporting the meeting. I'm what's known in the trade as a GSK returnee, so I was 16 years in GSK up to 96 in sales and marketing. I left to the biotech world to make my fortune, singularly failed, and I'm now back in GSK 12 years later, 3 years back into to working for SR1. But really what I want to talk about today is some sort of tectonic shifts in big pharma attitude to development of technologies and technology exploitation. A little bit about the corporate life science environment, a little bit about SR1, because really the reason for going through that is I want to try and explain why pharma's changing some of its business models in this area of technology exploitation and spin-outs. Talk a little bit about our investment thesis, because that applies to companies that we invest in life sciences and to how we analyse a spin-out and the quality of that spin-out in terms of it being successful. I'm then going to go talk you through some of the examples, a case study of the type of technologies that we're trying to exploit within GSK, and then draw some conclusions. So, corporate venturing in life sciences is a very critical element of the capital markets currently. Since the sort of 2008 meltdown, many VCs have been hunkering down, babysitting their existing portfolio, protecting their investments. Some VCs are struggling to raise money in the current environment. Now, corporate VCs have a very stable access to capital, so we're an evergreen fund, which means we don't report to LPs, we draw money down from GSK, and we have a return on capital target. Pharma uses our corporate venture fund within GSK as another way of innovating. We're effectively a scientific crow's nest. We're looking at science 5 to 7 years out and really giving GSK an insight into a variety of new areas. We've tended to, what's happened with the dynamics in the market is that corporate VCs have begun to replace some of the traditional sources of venture capital in the past. And I'll show you later, the number of new entrants in corporate venture capital has been huge. And our model is changing in the sense that we're now being highly creative in looking at externalization deals and also spin-outs. So this is the corporate venture world in terms of the global healthcare market, and in the period from 2007 to 2010, corporate VCs were involved in about 16% of deals. Some current data says that we're pretty much involved in about half of early-stage life science deals. So that's a pretty dramatic change in the last few years. You can see from this league table who the major players are. This is numbers of deals, and by far and away, the largest is the Novartis Venture Fund. We're about the third largest of the global healthcare funds. And interestingly, if you go down to the bottom, some interesting new entrants there with Google Ventures. So corporate healthcare VCs have joined and led a lot of deals in the last couple of years. And we're now thinking very creatively beyond our traditional equity model to things like option-style deals, PIPEs, we've done, that's public investment in public companies, and spin-outs, and I'll explain some of the examples of those. The new entrants in the corporate venture world recently include Boehringer Ingelheim, Merck Serono, Biogen. I think Cephalon announced the launch of a new venture fund in the US about 4 weeks ago. So increasingly companies are using that presence in the corporate venture world, one, to put money to work, but also to scan technologies and have that strategic role as well. Now, this is my real sales pitch for SR1, gratuitously, that if you have a corporate venture investor in your company, you are more likely to make more money. Now, I don't know the reason why that is, but I have a feeling it's the close proximity to the GSK R&D machine, where we're able to go over the firewall with the permission of the company and solve critical issues in regulatory, manufacturing, clinical trials, and the experience of the partners within SR1 draws on that GSK experience. So companies with at least 2 corporate VCs have a 75% probability of a 2-fold return and 50% greater than others, and actually more likely to get a bigger upfront payment in any deals. This analysis was done by Elsevier Strategic Transactions a couple of years ago. So some interesting insight into the fact that corporates can add value, whereas in the past there was some skepticism as to our motives. I can reassure you it's not to find drugs for GSK, it's to look at technologies and scan the market going forward. And we have to have a return on capital. So a little bit about SR1. One of the oldest corporate venture firms, I think JJDC, Johnson & Johnson, is older than us, established in 1985 from the SmithKline era. We've currently got about 200 million under management with about 600 million invested since the inception. In fact, that figure's probably higher now. And typically we'll have 20 to 25 companies in our portfolio at any one time. We have 6 investment professionals in the US, based in San Francisco, Boston, and Philadelphia, and there are 3 of us based here in Europe. And we have slimmed down the approval process. One of the big campaigns within GSK at the moment in all areas of the business is about simplification of the business. And rather than having some onerous big investment committee, it's the CEO, the president of R&D, and my boss. Those are the 3 people who sign off investment proposals within SR1. So we have 2 activities, and this is the one, the right-hand one I wanted to talk to you about today. So our traditional focus is on investing in early-stage life science companies. And since 2008, when Andrew Whitty joined as CEO, he was completely flabbergasted at the amount of technology sitting within global manufacturing, within R&D, within vaccines and biopharm, that was either sitting on the shelf or not being exploited. And this really was when SR1 was brought into the fold to start to begin to look at creative business models for exploiting technologies. Just to show you our current investment portfolio, this is a mix of the private and public companies. You can see predominantly about 65 to 70% of our investments are in the US. That reflects both the market and the establishment of the number of investment professionals, and you can see we have a presence here in Europe as well, and some legacy public companies which have floated since our original private investment. Now, in terms of our investment thesis, we focus on early-stage healthcare and life science companies. We typically expect to be in there for 5 to 7 years. This is really important because evergreen corporate venture companies like SR1 can stay with these companies through thick and thin. We're not driven hard to give a return to LPs at some critical point, and we can stay and help nurse that company through. So that's a very important other dynamic that we add to the business. There's no requirement to grant product rights back to GSK. It used to be a problem with corporate venture 20 years ago, where having strings attached caused problems for other investors. And we're very active. We like to take a board seat. We like to have a minimum of observer status, and we typically, each partner would have maybe 4 or 5 companies in their portfolio. Things we're really interested in at the moment are things that have the potential to profoundly change treatment algorithms. So we're looking at rare diseases, which is a big strategic focus for R&D. We're looking at profound areas like hearing and vision loss. We are looking at the moment to take SR1 into China and India. So really, those really driven markets where there's a lot of expectation of innovation in the future we're paying attention to. We've done our sort of first drug-device interface investment recently and our first diagnostic investment. So we're broadening that investment portfolio. So what makes a company fundable or a spin-out fundable? Well, it's got to have innovative, groundbreaking technology. It's got to address a clear, either unmet medical need or clear technology need. It's got to be well understood. In the case of technologies, it has to be mature in the sense that I'll show you later some of our drug delivery technologies are absolutely validated to full-scale manufacturing. Often I go to drug delivery meetings, there's some sexy new drug delivery technology. You start talking to the little company about, well, what happens at manufacturing scale? And there's a lot of looking at shoes and, well, we'll come to that later. And we're not in the game of developing technologies for other people. It needs to have a defined development path and route to market. Often we find investments, it's unclear how you productize this thing, how you make money out of it. And it needs to have solid IP protection. In terms of the strategy, it's got to have a clear plan, it's got to be understood and supported by the whole company. No ancillary projects, no side businesses, it's got to be very, very clear. The most important thing when we're looking at early stage life science companies is have they thought through the scientific, clinical, commercial, manufacturing and regulatory pathway. Reimbursement, these are all critical things. It may sound crazy that you're thinking about reimbursement back at a late stage preclinical product, but it's absolutely vital that you begin to think about those sort of things. And be willing to cut projects out when they look like they're going to fail. What about management? Well, strong, commercially minded management team, that's pretty much a given and pretty obvious. But efficient cost structure, we're looking for them to dance really cleverly around being virtual in the sense that you want to have your core technology well covered by your science. But if there are generic outside things such as maybe straightforward synthetic chemistry, etc., then look for people to outsource those and not build infrastructure within the company. Be ambitious, but stick to realistic timelines. I had a presentation from a company the other day. It's been around since 2001, and they're still at late stage lead optimization. And I said, well, where was that in the original business plan? Well, it was at year 4, and here we are at year 10. So you've got to have realistic timelines. And just to be repetitive, no ancillary projects or distractions. In terms of the structure, a straightforward equity ownership. One of the slightly controversial things in the university interface is what about the patents? We like them to be assigned to the company. The company is responsible for the IP. The university gets equity for both itself and the scientists. Business angels can be a real strength in this sort of environment, but they can also be complex in the sense that they may not be able to follow on and may get diluted out, so you have to understand those dynamics. We would typically look to make a significant stake that would give us board representation, and we like to syndicate. We like to share the risk with other VCs. So you'll see with, for instance, Bicycle Therapeutics, an investment we made recently, was syndicated with Novartis, with Atlas, and with Schroeder Life Sciences. That's 4 very serious players who can follow on several rounds of investment. Deal dynamics, again, we're going to hang in there for several years, think about the sort of exit, and just expect that you're going to have to go through several rounds of financing. And so with Bicycle, where there's 4 big players, the management team are not going to be distracted raising money because they can go to the 4 existing investors, set up that Series A funding, set up the Series B funding without having to go on the road. So that's really important. So I want to move on now, just to give you that flavour of why the capital markets are driving people like GSK to look differently at how it exploits both its medicines and its technologies. So what we did in 2008 was start to look around the organisation for creative ways of making or monetising assets within GSK. So I'll just give you an example of the type of deals I've done in the last couple of years. So in 2009, I sold an R&D unit in North Carolina, which basically undertook salt and polymorph screening for GSK. Group of individuals, highly motivated. We had a replica unit in Stevenage, and so we divested that unit to Catalent. I don't know whether Kent Payne, are you in the room? Not yet. Kent works for Catalent, had a lot of interactions with Kent. That was a great example of GSK reducing its footprint by 50%, generating an upfront cash payment for the technology that we'd invested in, offloading and outsourcing that work, and then having the opportunity a few years out to maybe consolidate it back to our source team in Stevenage. So a creative deal. At Christmas last year, I divested a capsule technology to Pfizer, to Capsugel, which is a well-known capsule manufacturer. Our drug had gone down in phase 2, left us with a beautiful technology, so we divested it, and then for that we got upfront payments and we have royalties on per unit sales. So again, that would have just been sitting on the shelf doing nothing had we not looked to exploit it. And then in the middle of last year, I sold the Zagreb site, which is a fully integrated R&D site, to Galapagos, my former company. Bit of an inside deal, but they needed a bunch of scientists, both about 50 chemists and 30 biologists, very, very quickly. And here was a pharma-scale, pharma-quality site, and unfortunately it retained those jobs, and they're now consumed with Galapagos work. So as a case study, I just want to talk to you about 3 examples of technologies that we're looking to exploit. The first one is liquid dispensing technology. Then I'll show you about a novel control release platform and media milling, or nanomilling as it's called, which is the core. Originally, in terms of outsourcing, been dominated by Elan Technologies. We have a different technology than GSK that we use. So liquid dispensing technology, this is game-changing manufacturing technology developed within GSK. And it's for highly potent compounds in a respirator-free environment. The footprint normally for a manufacturing environment like this is huge because of the containment required, the protection of the workers involved, etc. So GSK just sort of went back to the drawing board and has developed a technology that we originally piloted in 2005 in Pennsylvania, and now we've built the full-scale manufacturing facility in Barnard Castle. Several GSK compounds are in clinical development, are underway targeting that facility, but interestingly, we're also developing compounds for other pharma companies using this facility, and I'll explain how that's come about. and we own very strong IP on it. So LDT, the liquid dispensing technology, the tablets are manufactured by dispensing microliter quantity of the highly potent compound onto a carrier tablet. That carrier tablet then collects the API in the little red zone you can see there, and then we've used some printing technology out of the printing industry to then pad print the tablet and then mark the tablet up. But this technology is incredible because it is 24/7 unmanned. The API is filmed in flight to measure the exact liquid quantity dispensed onto the tablet. And that can deliver 6 droplets onto 6 different tablets per second. When that liquid settles on the tablet, we use near-infrared imaging technology to measure that the fluid has landed in exactly the right place and that during the drying process it will be retained in exactly the right place. Each tablet is monitored on a control system running on carrier tracks. So what's really profound about this process, because this is untouched by human hands, is that we have quality control data on every single tablet in this carrier rack, stored on computer, and then can be real-time released in terms of quality control. No taking the tablets away to be tested offline. This is all done 24/7 unmanned. That's the footprint. So you can imagine the difference between a footprint which looks like something slightly bigger than a high-throughput screening machine is a full-scale manufacturing machine capable of doing 1 million tablets a day, unmanned 24/7 with on-time, real-time release quality control. Now, the sad thing about this facility is that, again, we had a drug failure in phase 2, which meant that this facility is currently not being used. So what I've been doing is I've been turning up at drug delivery trade shows, and people are slightly disturbed by this to see GSK with a booth next to Elan Technologies and Urand, etc., marketing our drug delivery technologies to the pharmaceutical industry. Profound change in behaviour, really driven by the top management. So DIFCOR is a technology that we licensed from the University of Bath, from John Staniforth, about 10 years ago. We've developed that technology really robustly since then, and it's a proven control release technology, again, right the way from pilot through to commercial scale. It provides flexibility. We can deliver anything from 1 milligram to 2 grams. It allows for different titration demands. You can put multiple APIs within this. And the thing about it is that you can tailor the release profile by the size of the tablet, the size of the apertures that you saw in the picture before. These holes are drilled by a tungsten carbide drill. And you can put maybe 2 to 4 actives in there. So you can imagine a scenario where you could create a super generic, you could put a statin combined with amlodipine combined with metformin. We've got a wealth of metformin data. Sadly, we had a product targeted for Avandia combination with metformin in this technology. We've got a wealth of clinical data to demonstrate that we can achieve it. And again, we're out marketing this technology in the pharma industry. So as I said, it's an incredibly versatile and flexible platform that can give you the release profile that you need. You can get immediate release, you can get release in the stomach or release later in the duodenum, and you can control that by literally plugging and playing the different components of the drug delivery system. So we have validated this in the sense that we've launched Lamictal XR in the US. So we have the first example of DIFCOR live on the market, doing extremely well in the US. We've got a wealth of data around this, and just to prove that this amendment of the aperture size has given us very slick in vivo data to show that we can deliver those in vivo plasma concentrations by tailoring and mixing these different components of the versatility of the tablet. So, delivery of high and low doses, 1 milligram to 2 grams, delivery of actives of both high and low water solubility, a wide range of drug release profiles, capable of doing combination products. And it's a standardized process because using drilling, lasers can cause you problems around heat, around the aperture, and our drilling technology, again, it's giving us tremendous high throughput in our manufacturing facility, which is based in Zebulon in North Carolina. So that's a picture of the pilot machine, and just to explain, one of the really profound things about this is there is no issue over scale-up because these pilot units are just multiplied in our manufacturing capability. So in Zebulon, there are 5 of these. This one happens to be in Upper Merion, where we do the pilot validation of whether we can actually deliver. We do the validation study on the pilot facility, and then scale happens immediately. And again, you can imagine with Lamictal, we're currently very under capacity, having built this manufacturing facility for an Avandia-based drug, and I'm now out looking for partnerships, and I'll explain later where we are with that, with specialty and mid-sized pharma companies delivering next generation of control-release products. So the last technology, again, is another sad story in the sense that we built a €20 million nanomilling facility in Cork in Ireland to deliver on 3 compounds that were coming through development. 2 of those compounds failed. Unfortunately, that's life in drug discovery, and we're left with a beautiful state-of-the-art facility. But reduction and control of particle size is one of the most challenging things for the industry. Most active pharmaceutical ingredients, you need to get very good bioavailability, and across the industry, there's data that shows that maybe up to 40% of drugs have got some kind of solubility or bioavailability problem, which can be challenged and fixed by technologies such as nanomilling. So it's really for freely permeable compounds, and the sort of competing technologies that you can address this with are listed there through Elan, Baxter, and a number of other companies. We felt in GSK there was an alternative methodology for doing this, and you'll see in a moment that actually we've approached the whole thing a different way. It's often done in a single drum where you have to have the whole technology washed down and cleaned out. We've created what we call a nanomilling train, where the API literally moves from one drum to the next as you bash it up and you make the particle size smaller, and it's all computer controlled and very, very highly slick process. So here's just a very simple example of serum concentration, the difference between being micronized and medium milled, and you can see that dramatic increase in bioavailability based on using this technology. So you can get a faster onset of action, significant increase in plasma concentration, significant increase in exposure, something between 2- and 3-fold, and a reduction in interpatient variability, and that's a really critical component of the clinical endpoint of this. So there's this milling train. You can see the series of drums that the API passes through, and this again is all highly automated, highly computer controlled, highly online analysed, and again, this is sitting there in Cork, and at the moment, again, we're marketing it with our other drug delivery technologies as a capability available for pharma and biotech companies. There's a nice picture of Cork, different nice quality environment, and that's where that facility is based. So just to give you the strategy that GSK is adopting with these 3 technologies, what we're doing at the moment is we're doing these deals internally within GSK. So I currently am at term sheet for 2 major drug delivery deals with pharma companies. We're undertaking 2 feasibility studies, one for a large pharma, one for a specialty pharma company, and we've got a solid pipeline of leads coming through. But I am looking at alternative strategies, which is to maybe partner with a CMO. Contract manufacturing organisation may well have a bigger business development infrastructure, almost certainly the sales and marketing reach and capabilities. So we're evaluating at the moment whether that is a potential route to commercialise this business as well. Then lastly, what I've been asked to look at by the company is maybe spinning this out of GSK. You can imagine, I've had a conversation with a couple of big pharma companies in the top 4. He said, why would I give my secret, fantastic new drug to GSK to actually work on? So some people are very uncomfortable with the idea of us working on a compound for them. So we are looking at the potential of maybe spinning out a drug delivery business out of GSK and creating a new business and potentially raising money on the back of that. And one important element of that would be maybe we could put an asset from GSK's R&D pipeline within that business as well. So just coming near the end now, I just want to give you a sense of some of the other technologies that we're exploiting in GSK. So we have a light-induced sensor, which for those manufacturing anoraks in the room here is used for cleaning and verification. This is a proprietary technology that we developed. with a sensing company in the US. We licensed it to them. We're now moving on to develop a multi-wave sensor. And what basically the arrangement is, we've co-developed it with the sensing company in the US. GSK now gets royalties back on each unit sold. These units typically sell for $40,000 to $50,000 a go, and we're getting something around a 15 to 20% royalty back on those individual sales. Just cherry picking out of here, this is a really interesting one. This is what's called a wireless tablet-shaped sensor. This was developed by NASA and by American football to monitor the internal body temperature of individuals. So that was the original development. GSK then licensed that technology and then developed a version for manufacturing where you can put it into a manufacturing suite with your tablets that you're coating, and you can test the temperature and humidity within that manufacturing environment. Really, really cool technology. And what we're doing at the moment is working on a deal where giving the rights to somebody to sell to other pharma companies outside GSK. So really, really cool technology. Clinical trial acoustic vest. This is some IP developed in Research Triangle Park by GSK. Basically, there are sensors on the vest that can follow by sound the movement of a tablet in clinical trials down through the patient's alimentary tract. This competes with gamma scintigraphy, which is a complex technology that's often run out of major hospital centres. So here we have a mobile version that can be worn by the patient, and the data can be collected extremely easily. The same vest can be used for fetal heart rate monitoring. And again, what I'm doing at the moment is I'm talking to companies that are in the clinical trial arena and in the vest development arena about this development. And I don't know whether you followed the news last week, but GSK has just announced a major collaboration with McLaren Technologies, the Formula One racing team. Now, the principle there is to use McLaren's engineering excellence in terms of interaction with our manufacturing, but these are the masters of telemetry. If you watch a Formula One race, they are monitoring the vital signs of the driver, they're monitoring the vital signs of the car. So in the case of the clinical trial vest, I'm sure I'm going to be talking to the McLaren guys about some of the sensors and telemetry monitoring systems that they have that we could bring together with a pharmaceutical invention. So highly creative deals, highly interesting and stimulating environment. And the last one is one that's really right out there for GSK, and that is that our engineering and facilities department in GSK has developed a climate-neutral laboratory. It's basically taken pharmaceutical laboratory design and thrown it in the bin, and then redesigned a lab from scratch. Now, I must admit, it looks like something out of the Teletubbies because it's got all sorts of grass on the roof and it's got photovoltaic cells and it's got lots of other things. But the fundamental materials it's made out of, the amount of carbon burnt in shipping those materials to it, has all been analysed in a lot of detail. And the prototype has passed its proof of concept, where this new lab has demonstrated that it can be carbon neutral over 25 years. Now, I went out and did some market research with science park developers, with universities, etc., and the profound response was extremely positive. If I talk about our Stevenage site down the road and its carbon footprint, you'd be embarrassed. I mean, it's pumping out all sorts of stuff, and I won't go into that in detail. But this is a fundamental quantum shift in design about how you do pharmaceutical research. And the whole environment inside this lab is also extremely interesting. So we have a university, a UK university, I'm not able to tell you who it is, where the first one is going to be built. We have a second client within the UK university sector who also wants to place one of these on an eco park. So again, a fascinating project. We might ultimately spin out a company, project managing, because we own the invention, we own the IP and the know-how around this. It's a very interesting project because none of the IP or the know-how is necessarily that new, but it's the combination of them all put together that is unique to the IP that GSK's developed. So again, a potential spin out that we might develop from there. So this is just a final slide to show you, what I regard as looking like a new model for GSK. So the LIF sensor, the multi-channel sensor, and the clean room mobile cart, which contains a sensor, were co-developed with a company called Custom Sensors, based in the US. They then have a non-exclusive distribution deal with Natoli. Natoli is one of the largest tablet press manufacturers in the industry. And they are now out marketing this sensor for which GSK is receiving royalties. But what's fascinating about this API detection system is it's got applications in the oil industry, the gas industry, the paper industry, and the environmental industry. And this was really Andrew Whittie's vision of technology exploitation when he came in as CEO in 2008, to see GSK technologies exploited not only within the pharma sector, but also within other industrial sectors. And we're now working on further application development, and this could well generate $4 to $8 million a year downstream. Now, that doesn't sound like a huge amount of money to GSK, but if I tell you that the pharmaceutical development and the manufacturing guys have got relatively modest technology development budgets, this is going to be recycling money from projects developed by GSK over the next several years, generating a nice technology fund for which it can draw down to make the next set of future developments. So just in conclusion, it's a completely new, horrible word, but anyway, new paradigm emerging in terms of corporate venturing, where we're working with our research, manufacturing, and vaccine colleagues within GSK to exploit technologies. GSK's made a fundamental strategic decision to open up and exploit its technologies. We call this word open innovation is used, but this is part of that sort of open innovation strategy. We're working on a variety of business models you've seen there. Could be licensing, could be spin-out, could be joint venture. But I think it's incredibly exciting times because GSK has realised that its sustainable long-term competitive advantage is not the technology that it's developing, it's inventing new medicines. That's what our real sustainable advantage is. So in the meantime, if there are technologies that get us there, we're out looking to develop value for the company outside GSK. So that's it. Thank you very much.
So I think we have time for a couple of questions, David, if you're happy to stay. Does anybody have a burning question? I know David's around. You're around for most of the day, I think, aren't you? Can I ask then, you mentioned in your penultimate slide about Japan, and you've obviously talked about some of the emerging markets, recognising Japan isn't an emerging market, but can you say a bit more about what the relationship is with Japanese companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think really we're going home first in terms of trying to partner these technologies in the first world market. But there's a big initiative, as you know. One of the tenets of the 5 strategic objectives of GSK at the moment is the development into the emerging markets. So not only is SR1 looking to get into China and India, but we know now that we have a dedicated team in pharmaceutical development developing the products that are suitable for the emerging markets as well. So I'm sure that we're going to be taking these technologies wider than just the US and Europe.
And a final question, because I can.
You're in charge.
Yeah, obviously One Nucleus did an event in collaboration with GSK a few months ago, and that part of that was to raise the profile of the Open Innovation site. I wonder, for those of you who aren't aware of the new developments over at Stevenage, if you could say a bit about the biocatalyst.
Yeah, so I mean, essentially GSK, in a joint venture with the government, etc., set up the Stevenage Bioscience Catalyst, and the motivation for that is to put a bunch of small, innovative companies co-located on the GSK site where there can be strong interaction between those companies and GSK Sciences. So a good example is we're looking at potential investment in the company at the moment. This is the dream model for me, who'll be located on the Stevenage Science Park. They're a company that's already struck interest with the particular R&D department within GSK. So being co-located, they'll have strong interaction with our own team working in the same area. We'll be supporting the science part by investing in a company on that site. So everyone goes home feeling a winner out of that sort of business model.
Okay, thank you very much.